Loser. LeRoy, 1888. LeRoy staggered into Maggie's place through the bat-winged doors. Maggie raised her eyes at the sight of him from behind the bar. The new bar top was made of mahogany, shining in the sunlight coming through the doorway behind him. A new plank floor also had been installed the previous week. LeRoy, I haven't seen you since you went off with that new sweetie pie of yours last year, she said. What are you doing back this way? Where's your gal? She left without me, he said, the words feeling like sand in his mouth and throat as he stumbled toward the bar. He'd walked into town through the desert heat. It had taken him most of the day. When he'd been thrown away from Amaryllis, he'd awakened in the middle of the Nevada desert with the sun blaring down on him, his horse grazing a short distance away on the sparse prairie grasses. His saddlebags had been intact, but the flask hanging off his saddle had been empty. They had planned to refill their water at the cave. But when Harvey and the gang had intercepted them, Amaryllis had pushed the red button early. That's why LeRoy had been wandering through the desert, his throat so parched he felt like he'd been baked in one of Mrs. Parker's ovens along with her loaves. Sissy came out of the back with a washtub full of clean glasses, her face lighting up when she spotted him. LeRoy! She exclaimed, causing all eyes in the saloon to turn his way. You came back! She set the glass tub down, running to his side, throwing her arms around him. He was too weak to object. Besides, he needed to lean on her for strength to make it the rest of the way to the bar. You got any water back there? He said in a croak from a parched throat as Maggie stepped up to greet him. Maggie held out a tin cup to him, and he gladly took it from her. Placing both hands around it, he gulped the liquid greedily until he felt the burn down his throat all the way to his gullet, causing him to cough and sputter. That ain't water, Maggie, he croaked out at her. Looked to me like you needed something stronger, she said, laughing. What do you mean, she up and left you? She left you? Sissy said with hopeful tone. You mean she's really gone? Sissy, that will be enough, Maggie said, scolding her in a harsh tone. I don't think that is what LeRoy needs to hear right now. All day in the desert, he croaked. Water. Maggie said, Sissy, fetch him some water. Sissy snapped to attention, running out the back to get him a cup of water at the pump. LeRoy, what happened? Maggie asked. Where's the girl? LeRoy shook his head. How could he explain to Maggie that Amaryllis had disappeared in time? He could hardly grasp the event himself, and he'd lived through it. 1 minute Amaryllis was there as she pressed down the red button on the time doohickey. The next thing he knew, he woke up, thrown into the middle of the desert, but he had remained in his own time, or maybe a short time after, but he definitely hadn't gone with her into the future as planned. I don't know, he said. Wherever she went, I couldn't go with her. I'm the loser once more. Sissy returned with a tin cup, which she handed to LeRoy. He took it from her, gulping the cool liquid down, letting it soothe his parched throat. That's bad. What do you mean? Maggie asked. Where did she go? Doesn't matter where she went, he said, when he'd emptied the cup. I ain't with her, and I can't follow her. She's gone. I'll take care of you, LeRoy, Sissy said, pouting. You don't need her anyway. Amaryllis had warned him to let Sissy down easy. He thought getting her the job at Maggie's and setting up the trust for her would be enough, but he knew she'd been hurt when he'd left with the older woman who she considered a newcomer. Sissy was always be like a little sister to him. That's the only kind of love that could ever be between them. Sissy, I appreciate what you're saying, but, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Don't say it, she said, turning away from him, wrinkling her nose. I know I ain't the one you're in love with. Sissy, it's not that. I care for you, I truly do, he said, taking her shoulders in his hands, gently turning her back to face him. But it ain't the right kind of love. Looks like I'll always be around here to look after you, though. Maggie's words finally hit him. He turned to her. Maggie, what did you mean last year? How long have I been gone? Well, let me see, Maggie said, looking up toward the ceiling for a moment as she thought about the answer to his question. You all took out of here in August last year, so I reckon it's been a good 6 months. We really missed you at Christmas time. It was the first Christmas any of us ever spent without you. Just felt like something was missing, you know? 6 months, LeRoy said aloud, scratching his chin. So this is March 1888? I lost almost a half a year? Yeah, LeRoy, tell us where you been, Sissy said, piping in without being asked, as usual. It wasn't that he didn't want to answer her, but the truth was he didn't remember anything between the time Amaryllis made the jump through time and the time he woke up in the desert this morning. He didn't know where he'd been, but he knew where he hadn't been, wherever Amaryllis had gone. He'd lost it all. Instead, he avoided the question, replying, There'll be plenty of time to talk about that later. Looks like I'm here to stay. Well, if you're staying, this town could use a good sheriff, Maggie said, setting a beer down in front of him. Red Parker has been filling the spot since you shot Klavan. But if they give him the position permanently, we're all in trouble. He's a bigger horse's ass than Klavan was. Well, now, Maggie, he said, feeling suddenly uncomfortable, I don't think I'm sheriff material. Why not? Maggie asked. You turned yourself in, returning all that money because you got a strong sense of right and wrong. That is what I call sheriff material. The Batwing swung open as the large, hairy figure of Harvey Johnson entered the saloon. A lump formed in LeRoy's throat and his heart sped up. This could only be trouble. McAllister, I thought that was your horse outside. I've been looking for you for months. Where's that bitch you were with? Where did the two of you get off to? You always know how to cut to the chase, Harvey, LeRoy replied, his hand going to his gun. The last thing he wanted was to bring more trouble for Maggie. Can't say it's good to see you. Maybe we could take this outside, away from the ladies? Hell, them two ain't ladies any more than that bitch of yours, Harvey said, swinging an arm, inviting him toward the door. But if you want to take it outside, I ain't stopping you. Don't go, LeRoy, Sissy said, with dismay in her voice, grabbing hold of his arm. Stay out of this, Sissy, he said, shaking off her hand as he stepped away from the bar. He braced himself mentally as he walked through the Batwing doors, pausing to look back to make sure Harvey followed. Blaze was at the hitching post, right where he'd left her, figuring he wouldn't be taking her back to Monique after all. Harvey's men lined the boardwalk. LeRoy resisted a sudden urge to make a dash for the horse. This don't seem fair, Harvey, LeRoy said. I came out here to settle with you, not the whole gang. I never said nothing about being fair, McAllister, Harvey replied. Now where is the bitch? The score I got to settle is with her. If I can't find her, I guess you'll have to answer instead. She's gone, Harvey, LeRoy said, turning to face him, keeping his hand on his gun, sounding a lot more confident than he felt. I guarantee you won't find her, so I guess it's me you want. Let's get this over with. Thought you were pretty smart, didn't you? Harvey said, his hand resting on his holster. I don't know how you two disappeared like that, but you won't get away this time. You're going to tell me where that bitch is, or you'll take it to your grave. I can't, LeRoy said, staring him in the eyes. I don't know. Well, now, I don't believe you, McAllister, Harvey said. What do you say to that? You just drop that gun now, mister, said Sissy. She pushed open the Batwing, stepping onto the boardwalk with a gun aimed at Harvey. Sissy, what are you doing? LeRoy yelled out in surprise. Get back inside now! I ain't gonna let them kill you, Sissy said, tears running down her face. I just got you back. It wasn't like that, but LeRoy didn't think this was the time to argue the point. No, Sissy, it will be all right. Just go back inside. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Sissy, look out, he cried. But it was too late. Vince Brown, the only Negro in the Montoya gang, came up behind Sissy and grabbed her, pulling the gun from her hand. Sissy wiggled in Vince's grasp, but his big, meaty arm wrapped around her tight, pinning her against his body. Harvey, don't you let him harm her, LeRoy said. I'll do whatever you want. Just let her go. I don't think you're in any position to make demands, McAllister, he replied. Now draw. Are you sure you really want to do that? LeRoy said, stalling for time. We all know you can outdraw me. Let the girl go. We'll settle this man to man. The sound of a gun being cocked came from behind the batwing doors, drawing everyone's attention. Double barrels appeared above them. Then Maggie stepped through, sticking those barrels right in Vince's face. I don't know what's going on here, but you'll kindly turn that young girl loose right now. Vince dropped his hold on Sissy. She pulled away from him, running to Maggie's side. Maggie turned the barrels to the men on the dusty street, aiming in Harvey's general direction. LeRoy knew that with that scattergun, Maggie could take out half the gang members with one shot. Now the rest of you clear out of here before I lose my patience. There's not going to be any shots fired here tonight unless it's me doing the shooting, Maggie said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. The men froze in the street, not moving. She raised her voice to be heard better. Are you all deaf? I said clear out. That did it. Her raised voice must have broken whatever spell they were under, as all the men broke away, then several taking off at a run as they couldn't get away from there fast enough. All except big dumb Harvey, who remained in the street with his mouth agape, his bushy brow furrowed, his eyes dull and confused. LeRoy stepped up onto the boardwalk next to the ladies, pulling his gun from his holster. I wouldn't skin that gun if I were you, Harvey, he said. You might get me, but I'm pretty sure she won't miss. She's got them barrels centered right between your eyes. Harvey turned his gaze on LeRoy. There was a brief glimpse of recognition in his eyes as he began backing slowly away. You best move faster, LeRoy said. My lady friend has been holding that trigger a while. Her strength might give out. That shotgun might just go off accidentally. Harvey turned at that, breaking into a run, his size making him look oafish as he hurried to get away. He ain't exactly graceful, is he said to Maggie, placing an arm around her waist as they watched him exit town. When he reached the far end of the street, Sissy broke out laughing. I don't believe we just did that, she said with amazement in her voice. The three of us chased off the whole Montoya gang. You two shouldn't have interfered, LeRoy said. Now they can identify you as my known associates. They could come after you. Oh, now, LeRoy, you know I can handle things, Maggie said. Don't you worry about us. But Maggie, don't you but Maggie me, she said. We'll be just fine. I'll send Sissy over to alert Sheriff Parker. Until we get a new sheriff, he's in charge. Now you go on. Get out of here while the getting is good. Where do I go? LeRoy asked. I can't go out to my pa's place. Anyone I'm associated with is in danger. All right, then. You're already associated with us, Maggie replied, turning to go back inside. I guess you'll just have to stay here. We'll stand against them when they come. I can't let you do that, Maggie, LeRoy said, protesting. He dropped his arm from her waist, placing his hands on her shoulders. There's been enough damage from my poor decisions. You said yourself that you don't have anywhere else to go, Maggie said, placing an arm around his shoulder, guiding him back inside the saloon. I've taken care of you since you were little. I'm not about to stop now. LeRoy let himself be led through the batwings. He had to admit that he always felt safe with Maggie.